Interesting TCM and acupuncture. Pulse diagnosis, differentiation, summary, and the terminal pulse of every viscera. One, varieties of pulses. Fumai, or floating pulse, can be felt with light palpitation. It appears in external syndromes and can show yang deficiency and external rising. Hongmai, surging pulse, comes with a flourish and leaves leisurely. It happens when heat flourishes. Komai, hollow pulse. Its outside is large and floating with an empty center. It is seen in cases of great blood loss. Gemai, leather pulse. It is floating and beats on the finger. Its center is empty and edges are full. It indicates total loss of blood, loss of essence, miscarriage, or uterine bleeding. Shumai, empty pulse, floating, slow, and large. Indicates conditions with yang flourishing with heat. Sanmai, Shumai should indicate yin flourishing with heat. Sanmai, scattered pulse, floating and scattered with no root. It sometimes skips a beat. The original qi becomes hugely deficient and thus causes it to scatter or divide. Rumai, soggy pulse, floating, thin, and soft. It cannot be found with heavy pressure. The essence and blood are lost. The spleen is deficient and cannot control dampness. Weimai, faint or minute pulse, floating, thin, and soft, as if it is there, but it can't be felt. Qi and blood are hugely deficient and yang qi is abandoning. Summary, there are a total of 7 types of pulse in the category of fu or floating. The first is an excess pulse, the rest are deficiency. Part 2, Chenmai, sinking pulse category. Chenmai requires heavy pressure before it can be felt. It treats internal conditions and can also be seen in healthy people who happen to have yin pulse presentation. Fumai, or hidden pulse. The tendon must be pushed from the bone to feel it. Pathogenic sealing, extreme pain, and fainting illnesses are the pulse presentation of fumai, or hidden pulse. Laomai, or firm pulse. Long, wiry, and full. Yin cold amasses on the outside and creates a great excess seen in tumors. Shirmai, full pulse. Pressing it seems to be full, but without strength. It's seen in excess conditions and healthy people when they're at rest. It is one of the 6 yang pulses. Ruomai, or weak pulse, is deep, thin, without strength, and soft. Yang qi is deficient and in decline. Qi and blood are both deficient. Shimai, or thin pulse, is like a thread. It resonates on the finger like a bright star. Qi and blood are both deficient, and dampness are the patterns associated with it. Summary. The above 5 pulses are all seen in deep pulse presentation. The first 3 are full, and the last 2 are deficient. 2. Categories of distribution of pulse rate. Chirmai, slow pulse category. Chirmai shows as 1 full cycle of the breath, not equaling 4 beats of the pulse. Since in cold patterns, it's seen in cold patterns and can also be seen in pathogenic heat with nodding collecting. Huanmai, or unhurried pulse, is 4 beats per breath. It's a little slow as to seem unhurried, seen in damp and spleen deficiency as well as healthy people. Somai, or astringent pulse, comes and goes and seems to be constricted, slow, and not smooth. The qi is slow and the blood is in stasis. Phlegm from food stops on the interior. Jiamai, or knotted pulse, slow and stops sometimes intermittently, seen in yin flourishing with knotted qi, cold, phlegm, blood stasis, qi and blood deficiency decline. Daimai, or regularly intermittent. It moves and stops and tends to be associated with decline and weakness of the qi of an organ. It's coronary heart disease and so on. Note, these four pulse types are typically seen in slow pulse presentation. Aside from this, the 2 beats per breath is called sunmai, 1 beat is called baimai, 1 beat per breath is called duojingmai and occurs when the jing is being lost. It means the essence and qi are used up and there is danger. Summary, there are 7 pulses in this category. Fast pulse types. Fast pulse indicates 5 beats per breath and up to 7. Heat conditions and interior deficiency illnesses. Jimai, or swift pulse, is 1 breath per 7 beats. Yang in the extreme, yin is used up, yang qi about to abandon. Sumai, or urgent pulse, is fast and intermittent with no set count, seen in yang heat flourishing, phlegm food accumulation, and organ qi deficiency decline. Dongmai, or moving pulse, is slippery and fast with strength, only seen in the guan position, associated with pain and fright. Jinmai, or tight pulse, has a shape like a cord of rope, associated with cold pain, accumulation of food in the interior due to nighttime eating. Note, these 4 pulse types are seen in fast pulses with a high frequency. Also, when there's 1 beat per 8 breaths, this is called, when there's 1 breath per 8 beats, this is called jimai, or extreme pulse. And when there are 9 beats, it's called tuomai, or abandoning pulse. This is when the yin essence is totally deficient and used up. Yang heat attacks to the extreme. Above 9 heats is when yang qi has already breached. Summary, there are 6 pulses in this category. 3. Pulse strength categories. Deficiency pulse. The finger feels no strength. Deficiency pulse has no strength when lightly palpating or pressing. It feels loose and soft to the finger. It comes from qi and blood, both being deficient. Shimai, thin pulse. When the pulse is thin like a string and it seems faint like a star in the sky to the finger, it's seen in qi and blood deficiency and dampness conditions. Daimai, or regular intermittent pulse, is slow and stops in the middle. It is not regulated. The organ qi is in decline and weak. There is pain, fright, or sudden injury. Duanmai, or slow pulse. The front and the back are both slow. It does not arrive at the full location of the pulse. It has no strength and comes from qi injury. If it has strength, it's from qi stagnation. Floating, deficient and wide without strength. Scattered pulse, floating and scattered with no root. It is fast and not even. It is seen when yuan qi is vacuous and scatters or separates. Moist pulse, floating and thin and soft, heavy pressing does not reveal it. It is seen in essence and blood loss, spleen deficiency, dampness flourishing. Deep and deficient category, thin, small, and without strength. Ruomai, or weak pulse, is deep and thin and soft. It indicates that qi is deficient and sinking. It occurs after a long period of illness. Weimai, or faint pulse, extremely thin and without strength. After a long illness, the yang qi wishes to abandon the body. A new illness can cause the yang qi to suddenly abandon in cases such as automobile crash. It can also be seen in yang deficiency and is slow and without strength, or yin deficiency with heat. It can also be fast and without strength. Summary, there are 8 pulse variations above. Note, scattered, soggy, weak, and faint have differences. A commonality, all belong to the type of vacuity pulse. Individuated types. Scattered and moist are part of the floating pulse category. Scattered, or san, is floating without root. It is fast and uneven. Soggy, or ru, is floating, thin, and soft. Weak, or ruo, and faint, or minute, called wei, are both deep pulse types. Weak pulse is deep, thin, and soft. Faint or minute pulse is deep and seems like although it's there, it's also not there. 4. Shi, or full pulse types. They appear to have strength on the finger. Full pulse. Light pressing it, it is full of strength. Full pulse can be seen in excess conditions, as well as healthy people, and is one of the 6 yang pulses. Full heat, it tends to float and is fast. Excess cold, it tends to sink and is slow. Slippery pulse, shuai mai. It comes and goes like water flowing. It feels round and slippery to the finger. It comes from phlegm and damp, food accumulation, full heat, pregnancy, and is slippery and unhurried in young people, called level pulse. Xian, or wiry pulse, is taut and long like a guitar string. It shows the liver and gallbladder issues, pain, phlegm, and old age, but generally good health. In the last case, it can be wiry, but also a little hindered. Jinmai, or tight pulse. It's hard and tight on the finger like a wound rope. It's seen in excess cold, pain, and nighttime eating collecting in the body. Changmai, or long pulse. From back to front, it is one line. It passes the normal location of the pulse. It's seen when yang qi is in excess, heat conditions, yang conditions, and excess conditions. Da mai, or large pulse, is broad and seems as if it surges up violently. It's seen in healthy people as well as some illnesses. Summary: there are 5 pulse types in the above category of shimai, or full pulse. 5. Wide pulse types. Hongmai, or surging pulse, is associated with heat. It's also called da mai, or large pulse, illness entering. Shimai, or thin pulse, is also called small pulse and comes from blood and qi both being deficient. Summary: there are 2 types of pulse in the wide pulse category. Long pulse types. Changmai. If long pulse passes the Cun point, it's called Yi. If it passes the Chi point, it's called Lu. It is related to heat and yang excess and sometimes normal health. It can also be called longevity pulse, Chang Shou Mai. Xian Mai, or wiry pulse. It seems like a tight wire and has strength. It's associated with gallbladder and liver pain, phlegm, and general health in the elderly when it is wiry and a little hindered. Duan, or short pulse. It comes from qi illnesses. It has strength and is associated with qi stagnation. It has no strength. In such case, it's associated with qi heat. Summary: there are 3 types of pulse in the category of long pulses. Slippery pulse types. Hua mai, slippery pulse. It comes from phlegm, food accumulation. Slippery and unhurried are found in young people with normal health and is called level or pian pulse. Dong mai, or moving pulse, is slippery and fast, short in the guan position or another position. It's associated with pain and fear. So mai, or astringent pulse, is associated with qi stagnation and blood stasis, phlegm damp, and internal injury. Summary: there are 3 pulse types in the category of slippery pulse. Nervous pulse types. Xianmai, or wiry pulse, is associated with liver and gallbladder pain and phlegm. In the elderly, it indicates good health and may be slightly hindered. Jinmai, or tight pulse, is associated with cold pain, nighttime eating becoming stuck inside. Gemai, or leather pulse, is floating and wiry and hollow. It indicates great deficiency, absence of blood, loss of essence, miscarriage, and spotting menstrual blood. Lao Mai, or firm pulse, is wiry and long, as well as full and large, seen in yin cold collecting inside as one large excess pulse, or in tumors. Summary: there are three pulse categories in this. There are three pulse types in this category. Uniformity: Tumai, or hurried pulse, fast and sometimes stopping, associated with yin flourishing. GMI, pulse, knotted pulse, unhurried and sometimes stopping. It is a sign of yang flourishing. Daimai, or intermittent pulse, moves and stops and usually shows that one organ is in decline, as in the case with coronary heart disease. Summary: there are three pulses in this category. There are 28 pulses altogether. Pulses seen together in illness. Pulses seen together are called joined, or hemai, and can be joined by 2 or 3 pulses, and also 4 joined pulses. Joined pulses occur as a result of illness, and each one may be different. But if fu, or floating, is present, it's external. If shu, or fast, is present, it indicates heat. And if there are fu and shu together, it indicates external heat. This is just a basic example of how pulses join. We can see below how this presents in illness. Fu and jin, floating and tight. It's seen in exterior cold and wind obstruction. Fu and huan, floating and unhurried. It's seen in cold injury and exterior deficiency. Fu and shu, floating and fast. It's seen in external heat. Fu and shuai, floating and slippery. Wind, phlegm, external patterns with phlegm. Chen and chir, deep and slow. Internal cold. Chen and xian, deep and wiry. Liver stagnation and qi stagnation, water stopping inside. Chen and se, deep and astringent, is a sign of blood stasis. Chen and huan, deep and unhurried, spleen deficiency, damp residing within. Chen and xi, deep and thin, yin deficiency and blood deficiency. Chen, xi, and shu, deep, thin, and fast, yin deficiency and blood deficiency with heat. Shuai and shu, slippery and fast, phlegm heat, internal heat from food accumulation. Hong and shu, surging and fast, separates and heat, qi separates and heat flourishes. Xian and shu, wiry and fast, liver heat and liver fire. Xian and jin, wiry and tight, cold pain, cold stagnation of the liver. Xian and shi, wiry and thin, liver and kidney yin deficiency, liver stagnation, and spleen deficiency. Xian, shuai, and shu, liver, fire, phlegm, and phlegm, fire, internally consuming. Zhenzang pulse, the terminal pulses of every viscera. Zhenzang pulse presents when there is a serious illness with no stomach, no spirit, and no root in the pulse. The pathogen is deep and heavy, and the original qi is used up. The stomach qi is lost, and it's also called bai mai, or lost pulse, or jui mai, abandoning or finishing pulse, or sumai, or death pulse, or guan mai, or strange pulse. In the simple guai mai, or strange pulse, in the simple questions jade mechanism true hidden discussion, it says true hidden pulse means their days are numbered, and any true hidden pulse means the patient will die and cannot be treated. Zhenzang true hidden pulse has 5 organ types. The term hidden and organ can be used interchangeably in some cases, since the organs are hidden within the body, and show that the organ qi is lost and leaking out into the pulse. The 5 organs experience illness that is serious, and some of the essence and qi leaks out as it's lost. The stomach qi can be lost as a result of damp presentation of pulse, but the pulse itself has no stomach, spirit, or root, so it also has no sense of harmonization. The poem of Approaching Pulses discusses the idea that illness pulses should be separated into serious and the ones which can be recovered from. Outside of the regular channel pulses, there are also true pulses. The liver abandonment pulse seems like a knife blade. The heart abandonment pulse is short and very fast. The spleen pulse is pecking as if leaking by level. It is like water dripping out of a cup when it's overturned. The kidney abandonment pulse is like a shrimp swimming with fish. If it ends up in the Yongchuan point, it is the bladder abandonment pulse. The true pulses occur after the stomach already has no qi. When finding it will seem easy to break. The liver true pulse is like a knife blade. The pulse is wiry and hindered and tight and hurried. The body of the pulse is tight and long, very high, and pressing it feels like a knife blade cutting into it. The heart true pulse is like turning bean pulse, hard and sinking on the fingers. The lung true pulse is like boiling hot pulse. It is greatly vacuous. The kidney true pulse is called fish fly or shrimp swimming pulse, unwrapping rope pulse, strong stone pulse. In the hands, it feels like a string which will break, or a string made of stone which is hard and full. The spleen true pulse is like a bird pecking or gradual leaking pulse. It's soft and without strength and weak. It varies between slow and fast. The true pulse appears in clinical observation when chronic illnesses are in their terminal state. But in Chinese medicine, the meaning is not precisely the same as the idea of organ and viscera in Western medicine. In clinical observation, it's not advisable to copy it mechanically. No stomach qi pulse. No stomach qi pulse is when the pulse does not fill the artery. The finger feels tightness. It's like a grain of Job's tear plant. It is called rotating short pulse. If it is fast and uneven and tight, like a ball of stone, it's called ball stone pulse. If it shows that there is a pathogen causing upright qi to decline, if the pulse is wiry and hurried, it seems like a knife cutting and is called lying knife pulse. If the pulse is short and small and hard, the stomach qi cannot follow. The heart and liver and kidney organ qi will only be present, in which case it shows serious illness. No spirit pulse. No spirit pulse shows when the pulse does not follow any particular order. The pulse shape shows as scattered and disorderly. When the pulse is in the sinew and flesh and very fast, it may suddenly stop in the 3rd beat and then stop again in the 5th beat. It stops and then returns to action. It seems like a bird pecking at food. It's called bird pecking pulse, and it's leaking like water seeping out. And long after recovery, it's still leaking. This is called a multi-level leaking pulse. If the pulse is dredging and hidden, it seems to be recovering from disorder, but also tied together. This is called unbinding rope pulse. This belongs to spleen and therefore stomach. When kidney yang qi is in decline, the spirit and qi also scatter. This indicates end of life. No root pulse. No root pulse is when it's greatly vacuous, as though it has no root. It's minute, weak, and cannot be felt by the finger. If it's floating and fast in the extreme and seems like unclear boiling water in a pot, it's floating and weak without root. It's called boiling pot pulse. The 3 yang are experiencing extreme heat. The yin fluids are wasted and dry. The pulse is on the skin level, and it seems like the head of a rocking around. It seems present, but also not there, like a fish in water swimming. Then it's called fish fly pulse. If it's on the skin level and feels like a shrimp in water and at times jumps up and is intermittent and hurried, it's called shrimp swimming pulse. This belongs to the 3 in cold extreme condition and loss of yang to the outside. It's deficient yang floating in appearance. Thank you for watching.